What if I told you there was a real-life story about a black 3-foot-tall man who wanted to fly for the military? Would you believe it? Frankie D? Does that name ring a bell? Probably not.
I'm gonna be a pilot, Mama. One day I'm gonna fly my own plane.
You can do anything you want, baby.
Most people who know anything about him recognize the name because he was acclaimed movie star Ruby Dee's first husband. But even then, most only associate her with Ossie Davis. Very few people know who Frankie D really was, and even fewer know that he was a little person, a man who stood just over 3 feet tall. And he was not just Ruby Dee's former husband either, but that's only part of the story. What comes next is remarkable. Some might call it strange. Others might call it something else entirely. Frankie D. Brown was born in 1916. As a baby, he suffered a serious illness that permanently stunted his growth, leaving him under 4 feet tall for the rest of his life. Despite that, he didn't live a limited life. Let's go back to 1941. The United States was preparing for war. Aviation was becoming one of the most important and respected fields in the country. Young men were training to become pilots and enter military service. But in a black newspaper at the time, there was a story that stood out. The Atlanta Journal published the story with the bold header at that time. Midget Frankie D is short in size, but tall on personality. It read like a Hollywood film, a story only fit for a movie. A 24-year-old black man, 3 feet 9 inches tall, college educated, and training to become a pilot for the military. That man was Frankie D. Brown. At a time when segregation controlled access to education, jobs, and the military, he had already earned a degree from Langston University. He was the first little person to ever receive a college degree. He was also a part of the elite Alpha Phi Alpha, one of the most respected black fraternities in the country. He was operating in educated elite black spaces, but that didn't protect him from how society treated him. Before pursuing aviation, he had already built a life that didn't follow the usual path. Some would even say some of his gigs were humiliating, like being paid to wear a diaper for a Hollywood gig. He worked as a page boy in luxury hotels across the country, including the Adolphus Hotel in Dallas and the Congress Hotel in Chicago. These were places many black Americans couldn't freely access, yet he worked inside them. He traveled constantly, moving from city to city and building connections. Dee also spent significant time flying, not as a pilot, but as a passenger. By the early 1940s, he had logged an estimated 36,000 miles on commercial flights. At a time when flying was still expensive and uncommon, he was already familiar with aviation. And he didn't just enjoy it, he studied it. Frankie D. Brown believed his size could actually be an advantage in aviation. Because he was lighter, he argued that planes could carry more fuel or ammunition with someone like him on board. He trained at Roosevelt Field in New York, a major aviation site, preparing to become a pilot. But there was one barrier he couldn't overcome: the military. Despite his education and training, he was denied entry. Height requirements and physical standards disqualified him before he ever had the chance to prove himself. That opportunity was closed to him. At the same time, another part of his life was moving in a completely different direction. He appeared at public events as a form of entertainment. At the Beaux-Arts Ball in New York, he appeared alongside Vera Francis and other performers. But he wasn't presented as an educated man or aviation trainee. He was dressed in a diaper. He was used as a visual attraction. This is where the contradiction becomes clear. How did a college-educated black man and a member of Alpha Phi Alpha studying aviation be used as a spectacle? You see, that wasn't unusual for the time. People with physical differences were often pushed into entertainment roles, regardless of their education or ability. But Frankie D. Brown was not limited to that role. He was also active in the Negro theater scene in New York. This was a growing space where black performers were building careers outside of mainstream Hollywood. It was through this environment that he met a young actress named Ruby Wallace. She was working with the American Negro Theater and developing her skills. That's where they met. According to newspaper coverage, he was one of the people who supported her early development. He encouraged her work as an actress and performer before she became widely known. In 1941, they got married. By that time, he was a wealthy man living in Harlem and seen around town with the likes of Muhammad Ali. This was before her rise to fame and before her later relationship with Ossie Davis. After their marriage ended in divorce, one thing remained: the name Dee. It became part of her professional identity. Ruby would use only this name and not Ossie's, and that reason was never revealed. Meanwhile, Frankie D. Brown continued building his own life. He worked in multiple areas, including promotions, radio, and business. He built connections and moved between different industries. Frank, as some also called him, continued to build more wealth. In Harlem, during a time when black property ownership was limited, he purchased property and became a landlord. He was financially stable and operated as a businessman. At the same time, he continued working as a promoter and salesman. Over time, he spent more than 25 years working in the liquor business. Later in life, he moved to Omaha, Nebraska to be closer to family. And this is another part of the story that often gets overlooked. He was connected to a larger family legacy. Mr. D's nephew, the Honorable Frank Brown, went on to establish his own place in history. So while Frankie D. Brown's name faded from public discussion, his family's presence did not. He passed away in 2003 in Omaha, Nebraska. There were no major headlines or national coverage. His story ended quietly. And that raises an important question. How does someone with this kind of life become almost completely forgotten? He was the very first little person to receive a degree, connected to elite institutions, involved in aviation, and attempted to serve in the military. You see, Frankie was ahead of his time. Years later, the military would allow height waivers for shorter people to serve. He was also part of the legendary theater scene with the likes of future Oscar winner Sidney Poitier. He was a wealthy businessman and property owner, and formerly married to a future movie star. And yet his name is rarely mentioned. Frankie D. Brown didn't fit into a single narrative. He was successful in some areas and exploited in others. He was visible in certain spaces and overlooked in others. But one thing remains: he never gave up, and that is truly foundational. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. This report is based on archival black newspaper coverage from 1941, including features published by the Atlanta Daily World, along with historical records documenting Frankie D. Brown's life, career, and connections. Legal disclaimer. This content is presented for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes. Historical descriptions reflect the realities of the time and may include sensitive material. Every effort has been made to present accurate information based on available sources.